Now, it might have only been 5 to 10 minutes, but it's gonna be etched in my memory for my entire life. So my name is David. I grew up in San Francisco. I always had a plan to go to Nepal to trek the Annapurna Mountains. I went in with just the mindset of let's just do it and let's see where it takes me. I think when you go to Annapurna, you really can't describe it in pictures. You really just have to be there, because when you're there, you're surrounded by some of the tallest mountains in the world. We woke up around 6 a.m. to catch the sunrise. We're just kind of hanging out, taking pictures, and then all of a sudden I look up and I just see this cloud of white.
Oh my God! Holy crap! Avalanche!
Oh wow, and then it got really exciting because we were all taking pictures.
Oh my God, I got it on video. Oh my God!
And I think after like 5 seconds, I was like, yo, should we start running? This is coming towards us.
I've seen one like that. Should we be careful?
And then Stu was like, yeah, we should.
Shit, run!
And Stu was like the first one out, and he's like ahead of me. I'm like the next one, and you know, you're like the last one. I think you're just staying there taking pictures or something. And then all of a sudden, it's just like it starts coming closer and closer.
Look at that avalanche coming down right now. We had to run. That is not a cloud, that is an avalanche.
This gust of white snow just comes at us at like 50 miles an hour or something. And
all right, here we go. Maybe we should leave now.
So I had to kind of go back into the tea house. I was like, wow, I saw an avalanche and I'm okay.
So what were you saying before?
The guy at the lodge said he's never seen something as big as this one, so
Yeah.
good thing we stayed, we're safe. But that was probably the highlight of my 16 days here.
Now, it might have only been 5 to 10 minutes, but it's gonna be etched in my memory for my entire life. I think that was what was so special about the trip. Everything was spontaneous and everything was unplanned, and that was the beauty of it.
Walk into any computer science or engineering class at Ohlone, and chances are you will only find a handful of women students. Gauri Jamakandi is the first woman in her family to pursue a career in STEM, the acronym for science, technology, engineering, and math.
It makes me feel like hopefully in the future any other family that we have, younger kids can look up to me and say, oh, I can try that out too.
Rhythma Mathar was on track to be a business major, but recently switched to computer science. She still recalls her first class.
The woman professor, she was one of the 3 women in the class, and I just remember walking in, and I wasn't entirely sure where to sit, you know, where I would be most comfortable.
Ohloni's associate professor of engineering recalls carrying the burden of always wondering how she's being judged.
One of my male colleagues there said to me, Rose Margaret, you know what, you really shouldn't be here working. What are you doing in engineering that demands a lot of brain work? What you should be doing is at home cooking for your husband. And then I looked at him and I said, okay, well, if that's what you think I should be doing, then you should be out hunting, since we're back in the cave ages.
Dr. Ituwa studied undergrad in Nigeria, then pursued 2 masters and eventually her PhD in cybernetics in the UK. Ultimately, she made her way to the US, where she felt being female wasn't the only adversity she faced.
I think for the first time, it dawned on me I was black.
Professor Ituwa says Ohlone College is very diverse, and she hasn't faced any adversities personally. However, she does observe female students falling into traditional societal roles in class.
The female students are the secretaries or note takers, and then the male students are the ones doing the hands-on technical experiments.
Speaking to all three women, I learned that being a female in a male-dominated industry can sometimes be frustrating and even isolating. Gori chooses to turn her anger and frustration into something she views as positive.
If I'm able to make it through that encounter and work harder and prove myself, then it ends up being a pro in the end because I have worked harder and I have learned new skills and done more. Even if it's just to reach that same level, I have intrinsic development.
Dr. Itoa hasn't seen the field of engineering change much during her career, but with new programs, scholarships, and initiatives aimed at boosting diversity, she's optimistic. Professor Itoa emphasizes it's important that every female student is heard.
Voice your opinion, do not be afraid that you're not good enough, and that's always the biggest fear of my female students. They feel they're not good enough. And I'm like, if only you know how amazing you are.
On the Ohlone campus in Fremont, I'm Eileen Street for Ohlone Network News.
Renunciar a la revolución. Renunciar al socialismo.
Viva la Revolución, or Long Live the Revolution, is a rallying cry often associated with Fidel Castro's long fight against American imperialism. I sat down with Ohlone College's Associate Professor of History, Dr. Kyle Livy, to learn more about the dynamic dictator that Dr. Livy described as complicated.
So he was simultaneously both a figure that rejected and inspired this rejection of Western intervention and American intervention in Latin America, which was very commonplace. But he also kind of appropriated a lot of the persona and style of Latin American dictators who were very much built into that sense of dependency on the West.
Given the tumultuous relationship between the U.S. and Cuba since Castro assumed power in 1959, some may wonder why anyone ever saw him as a hero.
Under Castro, Cuba developed a social welfare state that provided for the Cuban people in a way that is, thinking about life expectancy in Cuba. It's unrivaled in Latin America. There's all of these things that happened that I think there are some even in the United States that looked and said, why can't we accomplish this if we're such a wealthy nation, if such a poor nation can do this?
Dr. Livy further explained it's complicated to talk about positives and negatives under Castro's regime because some of the dictator's achievements were born out of his rigorous control of the nation and Cuban people.
He was a brutal dictator who suppressed opposition through violence, through intimidation, by jailing thousands of people who opposed him. Over Castro's rule, over 1 million people fled Cuba.
During Cuba's official 9 days of mourning following Castro's death, the U.S. Embassy in Havana did not lower its flag to half-staff, while the Cuban embassy in Washington, D.C. did. So what does the former dictator's death mean for U.S. and Cuban relations going forward?
At least in the short term, that not as much will change even with the Trump administration in terms of our relationship with Cuba, because we have not taken some of the major steps of liberalization, including a full end to the embargo.
So ultimately, what does Fidel Castro's death mean within the larger context?
This moment is so important historically and so important in terms of symbolism, thinking about a potential transition, but not a whole lot has changed with his death. What will start to change, I think, is when Raul Castro leaves office. That's where we're going to see the potential for greater change in Cuba.
On the Ohlone campus in Fremont, I'm Eileen Street for Ohlone Network News.
5, 6, 7, 8.
In, Over, Around, and Through is the name of Ohlone spring dance production. The show's theme relates to the choices people make when obstacles are in their way. One of the performers, Noelle Wilder, is hard of hearing. Some may assume this is a barrier to dancing, but it hasn't stopped her.
Well, I've been dancing since I was about 3. I remember I grew up always dancing. Dancing's always been part of my life.
Noelle has 2 interpreters that work as a team to ensure she understands the verbal aspects of the class, in addition to the visual. However, signing and watching the instructor aren't the only ways that Noelle learns.
One of my older studios that I was dancing at, they had a speaker on the floor there, And so I was able to go up there and I was able to feel and touch the stereo myself, because if I couldn't figure out the count of the music, then I would just touch it. And then once I touched it, I was able to know.
In her hip hop class, the speakers are hung from the ceiling, but this isn't an obstacle for Noelle.
It's very loud inside. There's lots of vibration in the class. I can feel it through the floors, but I trained my brain and my body to learn how to feel music more than just depend on my hearing.
Her hard work in this hip hop class and other dance classes at Ohlone hasn't gone unnoticed.
I'm a student choreographer this semester. I'm the first deaf person to actually be a student choreographer here at Ohlone.
You're gonna get a star drop behind you.
Noelle's first choreographed piece premieres tomorrow evening at the Smith Center. On the Ohlone campus in Fremont, I'm Eileen Street for Ohlone Network News.